In the ancient kingdom of Eldermere, where golden spires pierce the clouds and secrets lurk behind every marble column, power isn't just inherited. It's earned through blood, betrayal, and impossible choices. When Queen Regent Isidora's cruelty toward young Princess Lina crossed every line of decency, she never imagined that the silent guardsmen watching from the shadows had sworn a different oath entirely. Some protectors served the crown, but Captain Marcus Thorne served something far more precious, the innocent heart of a child who deserved better than the venom of those who should have loved her most. What happened next would shake the very foundations of the realm, proving that sometimes the greatest acts of loyalty require the ultimate betrayal of duty. In a world where royal blood means everything, one man's conscience would mean even more. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Eldermere Palace as 8-year-old Princess Lina hurried through the corridors, her small hands clutching a worn leather journal. Her golden hair bounced with each step, and, despite the early hour, her emerald eyes sparkled with the kind of joy that only children possessed. Today was special. Today she would finally show Queen Regent Isidora the poems she had been writing in secret. Captain Marcus Thorne watched the young princess from his post near the grand staircase, a gentle smile tugging at the corners of his weathered face. At 35, Marcus had served the royal family for over a decade, but it was only in recent months that he had truly understood what it meant to protect someone. Princess Lina wasn't just another royal charge to him. She was the bright light in a palace that had grown increasingly dark since her father, King Edmund, had fallen ill. The kingdom of Eldermere had once been renowned for its prosperity and the kindness of its rulers. King Edmund had been beloved by his people, known for his fair judgments and generous heart. But when a mysterious illness struck him down 2 years ago, leaving him bedridden and barely conscious, everything changed. Queen Regent Isidora, his second wife and Lina's stepmother, had assumed control of the kingdom with an iron fist that grew tighter each passing month. Marcus remembered the woman Isidora had once been, or at least, the woman she had pretended to be. When she first arrived at court 5 years ago, she had been charming and gracious, winning over King Edmund with her wit and apparent devotion to young Lina. The princess had been only 3 then, motherless since birth, and Isidora had seemed like a blessing. But crowns had a way of revealing people's true nature, and Isidora's transformation had been as swift as it was complete. The captain's thoughts were interrupted as Princess Lina approached the queen's private study. Through the partially open door, he could see Isidora seated at an ornate desk, reviewing documents with her personal advisor, Lord Blackwood. The Queen Regent was a striking woman of 32, with raven-black hair always pulled into a severe bun and violet eyes that seemed to calculate the worth of everything they observed. Today she wore a deep burgundy gown that matched her increasingly cold demeanor. "Your Majesty," Princess Lina called softly as she knocked on the doorframe. "May I speak with you? I have something wonderful to show you." Isidora looked up from her papers with visible irritation. "Princess Lina, how many times must I tell you not to interrupt me during important state business? The kingdom doesn't run itself, though I suppose someone of your age wouldn't understand such responsibilities." Marcus felt his jaw tighten at the queen's tone. He had witnessed too many such exchanges lately, each one chipping away at the child's natural exuberance. But Lina, resilient as always, stepped forward with renewed hope. "I know you're very busy, Your Majesty, but I wrote some poems about our kingdom, and I thought perhaps you might like to read them. I worked very hard on them." The princess opened her journal to reveal pages covered in careful, childish handwriting decorated with small drawings of flowers and birds. Lord Blackwood, a thin man with calculating eyes, let out a soft chuckle. Poetry? At her age? Surely there are more practical subjects the princess should be focusing on. Isidora's lips curved into what might have been a smile on anyone else's face. But, on hers, it resembled the expression of a cat cornering a mouse. "Indeed, Lord Blackwood, poetry is a luxury we cannot afford in these times." She turned her cold gaze to Lina. "Princess, while I'm sure your little verses are charming in their own childish way, I'm afraid I have no time for such frivolities. Perhaps you should spend less time scribbling fantasies and more time learning about the real responsibilities you'll inherit. The light in Lyanna's eyes dimmed slightly, but she persisted with the stubborn hope of childhood. But, Your Majesty, one of them is about you. I wrote about how beautiful and wise you are, and how grateful I am that you take care of our kingdom. For a moment, something flickered across Isadora's face, perhaps surprise, or even a hint of conscience. But it was quickly replaced by her usual mask of disdain. How touching, she said with false sweetness. However, I wonder if your time might be better spent learning why your father's illness has put such strain on our treasury, or why several of our noble houses have begun questioning the wisdom of having a child as heir to the throne. Marcus felt his hands clench involuntarily. The queen was crossing lines that should never be crossed, using her adult fears and political machinations to wound a child who had done nothing but offer love and creativity. I don't understand, Lyanna said quietly, her journal now held protectively against her chest. Of course you don't, Isadora continued, rising from her chair to tower over the small girl. You understand so little, in fact, that sometimes I wonder if the kingdom might be better served by someone with more practical intelligence. Your father was a dreamer too, you know. Look where that has gotten us. The words hit their mark with devastating precision. Lyanna's face crumpled as if she had been physically struck. My father is a good king, she whispered, tears beginning to well in her emerald eyes. Your father is dying, child, Isadora said with brutal efficiency. And, when he's gone, this kingdom will need a ruler who can face reality, not hide behind pretty words and childish fantasies. Poetry won't feed our people or strengthen our defenses. Perhaps it's time you learned that harsh truth. Marcus had heard enough. Every instinct he possessed screamed at him to intervene, but his position demanded restraint. He was bound by oaths of service and protocols that had been drilled into him since his first day as a palace guard. Yet watching this innocent child being systematically broken down by someone who should have been protecting her was more than he could bear in silence. Your Majesty, he said, stepping forward and offering a respectful bow. Forgive the interruption, but you're needed urgently in the throne room. There's been a development regarding the grain shipments from the eastern provinces. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Isadora looked annoyed at the interruption, but couldn't ignore what sounded like pressing state business. Very well, Captain Thorne. Princess Lyanna, we'll continue this conversation later. Perhaps by then, you'll have given some thought to more suitable pursuits for a future queen. As Isadora swept from the room with Lord Blackwood in tow, Marcus knelt down to Princess Lyanna's level. The child was fighting back tears with the kind of brave determination that broke his heart. Princess, he said gently, would you like to show me your poems? I have a few minutes before my next patrol, and I'd be honored to hear what you've written. Lyanna looked up at him with surprise and cautious hope. You really want to see them, Captain Thorne? They're just silly little poems. There's nothing silly about expressing yourself through words, Marcus replied firmly. In fact, I think it shows great courage and wisdom. Your father would be very proud. For the first time that morning, Lyanna's face brightened. She opened her journal and began to read in her sweet, clear voice. The poems were indeed childish in their simplicity, but they were filled with such pure love for her kingdom, her people, and even for the stepmother who had just crushed her spirit. As Marcus listened, he felt something shift inside him. A resolve that had been building for months finally crystallized into absolute certainty. The kingdom of Eldermere was heading toward darkness under Isadora's rule, but Princess Lyanna represented something that couldn't be allowed to die. She embodied the kindness and hope that her father had once brought to the throne, qualities that the realm desperately needed to survive the coming storms. As the child finished reading her poems, Marcus made a silent vow that would change everything. Whatever it took, however dangerous it might be, he would ensure that Princess Lyanna's light would not be extinguished by those who should have been nurturing it. Some oaths, he realized, were more important than others. The seeds of rebellion had been planted in a loyal heart, and they were already beginning to grow. 3 days after the incident with the poems, Captain Marcus Thorne found himself walking the castle's ancient ramparts in the pre-dawn darkness, his mind churning with possibilities and dangers. The cool mountain air carried the scent of approaching autumn, and somewhere in the distance, a lone wolf howled, a sound that seemed to echo the growing unrest in his soul. Princess Lina had not been the same since Queen Regent Isidora's cruel dismissal of her poetry. The child still performed her daily duties with grace, attending her lessons and making appearances at court, but the spark in her emerald eyes had dimmed considerably. Marcus had watched her during the past few days, noting how she flinched whenever Isidora entered a room, how she had stopped humming the little songs she used to love, and how she now walked through the palace corridors with her shoulders hunched as if expecting another blow. What troubled Marcus even more was the pattern he was beginning to recognize. Isidora's treatment of Lina wasn't random cruelty. It was systematic. Each cutting remark, each dismissal, each cold rejection was carefully calculated to undermine the princess's confidence and natural authority. The Queen Regent was methodically destroying everything that made Lina a potential threat to her own power. As Marcus reached the eastern tower, he paused at the window that overlooked the royal garden. Even in the dim starlight, he could make out the small figure seated on a stone bench beneath the ancient oak tree. Princess Lina, wrapped in a dark cloak, her journal open on her lap. She often came here when she couldn't sleep, finding solace in the place where her late mother had once walked. The captain's heart ached as he watched the lonely child. She was writing again, her small hand moving carefully across the page, but now she hid her creativity in the shadows rather than sharing it with joy. This was what Isidora's cruelty had accomplished, the slow murder of a child's spirit. Marcus was so absorbed in his observations that he almost missed the sound of approaching footsteps. He turned to see Sir Garrett Ashworth, his closest friend among the palace guard, climbing the stone steps to join him on the ramparts. Couldn't sleep either? Garrett asked quietly as he reached Marcus's side. At 28, Garrett was 7 years younger than Marcus, but their shared experiences in service to the crown had forged a bond stronger than blood. Where Marcus was tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair touched by early silver, Garrett was lean and quick, with auburn hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Too much on my mind, Marcus admitted, grateful for the company of someone he trusted completely. Tell me, Garrett, what do you see when you look at our kingdom these days? Garrett followed Marcus's gaze toward the garden where Princess Lina sat in solitude. I see a realm in transition, he said carefully, and a young princess who bears burdens no child should carry. And the Queen Regent? That's a more complicated question. Garrett was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words with the caution of a man who understood that certain conversations could be considered treason. I see a woman who has embraced power perhaps too completely. A woman who views compassion as weakness and fear as an acceptable tool of governance. Marcus nodded grimly. Yesterday, I overheard her speaking with Lord Blackwood about the possibility of arranging Princess Lina's marriage to Prince Aldrich of Ravencrest. The girl is 8 years old, Garrett. 8. Ravencrest. Garrett's voice sharpened with alarm. But Prince Aldrich is known for his cruelty, even toward his own people. And he's nearly 30. Isidora doesn't care about Lina's happiness or welfare. She cares about removing a potential rival and securing an alliance that strengthens her own position. Marcus's voice was heavy with disgust. The contract wouldn't be finalized until Lina comes of age, of course, but the betrothal would be binding. The princess would be trapped in a life of misery before she's old enough to understand what's been stolen from her. Garrett was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. And King Edmund? Surely he wouldn't approve such an arrangement if he knew. The king barely knows his own name most days, Marcus said sadly. His illness has progressed to the point where Isidora can claim his approval for nearly any decision she makes. The royal physicians say he may not live to see another winter. Then, Princess Lina would become queen, under Isidora's regency until she reaches majority. But if Lina is married to Aldrich, her husband would have significant influence over Eldermere's throne. Some would argue that he would be the true ruler, with Lina as little more than a figurehead. Marcus's hands clenched around the stone battlements. It's a masterful political maneuver, if you can stomach the cost and human suffering. Garrett studied his friend's profile in the pale starlight. You're thinking of doing something about this, aren't you? Marcus turned to meet Garrett's gaze directly. I'm thinking that some oaths are more sacred than others. We swore to protect the royal family, but what if protecting one member means opposing another? That's dangerous talk, Marcus. Even between friends. Everything worthwhile is dangerous these days. Marcus gestured toward the garden where Princess Lyanna still sat alone. Look at her, Garrett. Really look at her. 3 months ago, she was a joyful child who saw good in everyone and everything. Now she hides in the darkness to write poetry because she's afraid of being mocked and belittled. How long before that light is extinguished completely? Garrett sighed deeply. What are you proposing? We can't simply remove a queen regent without cause. And we certainly can't kidnap a princess, no matter how noble our intentions. I don't know yet, Marcus admitted. But I know I can't continue to stand by and watch Isadora destroy everything good about this kingdom. Princess Lyanna represents hope. Hope for a return to the kind of ruler her father was. Hope for justice and compassion rather than fear and manipulation. And you think you can preserve that hope? I think I have to try. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the courtyard below. Torchlight flickered as a small group of riders approached the main gate, their horses lathered with sweat despite the early hour. Marcus and Garrett exchanged glances before hurrying down to investigate. In the courtyard, they found Sir William Blackthorne, captain of the Eastern Border Patrol, dismounting from his exhausted horse. His armor bore the stains of hard travel, and his face was grim with urgent news. Captain Thorne, Sir William called out as he spotted Marcus among the gathering guards. I need to speak with the Queen Regent immediately. We've received disturbing reports from the eastern provinces. What kind of reports? Marcus asked, though something in the man's demeanor told him he wouldn't like the answer. Rebellion, sir. Lord Aldwin of Eastmoor has declared that he no longer recognizes Queen Regent Isadora's authority. He's claiming that her regency is illegitimate and that Princess Lyanna should be crowned immediately under a council of regents chosen by the noble houses. Marcus felt his heart race. How many houses support him? At least 3 that we know of, possibly more. They're demanding that Princess Lyanna be removed from the capital and placed under their protection until she reaches majority. Sir William's expression darkened. There are also rumors that they question the princess's safety under the current regency. Those are serious accusations, Garrett said carefully. Serious enough that Lord Aldwin has begun mobilizing troops, Sir William confirmed. He's calling it a liberation, not a rebellion. Marcus's mind raced as he processed this information. If the Eastern Lords were moving against Isadora, the Queen Regent would be forced to take decisive action to maintain her power. And, in Marcus's experience, when cornered rulers took decisive action, innocent people often suffered the consequences. I'll escort you to the Queen Regent, Marcus said to Sir William. She'll want to hear this immediately. As they walked toward the main palace, Marcus caught Garrett's eye and saw his own concerns reflected there. The kingdom was sliding toward civil war, and Princess Lyanna was caught directly in the middle, a pawn in a game being played by adults who cared more about power than her welfare. When they reached Isadora's private chambers, they found her already awake and dressed, as if she had been expecting bad news. Lord Blackwood stood at her side, his thin face bearing an expression of cold calculation. Your Majesty, Sir William began, bowing deeply. I bring urgent word from the eastern provinces. As the captain delivered his report, Marcus watched Isadora's face carefully. He saw no surprise there, only a hardening of resolve that suggested she had been preparing for this moment. When Sir William finished speaking, the room fell into tense silence. So, Isadora said finally, her voice deadly quiet. The Eastern Lords think they can protect Princess Lyanna better than I can. How touching. Her violet eyes glittered with dangerous light. Lord Blackwood, begin preparations immediately. We'll be departing for the northern fortress within the week. Your Majesty? Sir William looked confused. You mean to flee? I mean to relocate the princess to a more secure location while we deal with this misunderstanding. Isadora replied smoothly. Princess Lyanna's safety is my primary concern, of course. The northern fortress is impregnable and far from the reach of these misguided rebels. Marcus felt ice forming in his veins. The northern fortress was indeed impregnable. It was also completely isolated, a place where a young princess could disappear from the eyes of the world entirely. If Isadora took Lina there, she could control every aspect of the child's life without interference from anyone. And the betrothal arrangements with Prince Aldrich? Lord Blackwood asked quietly. Will proceed as planned, Isadora confirmed. In fact, perhaps it would be wise to accelerate the timeline. Once Princess Lina is safely married to our ally in Ravencrest, these Eastern lords will find their rebellion considerably less attractive. Marcus's worst fears were being confirmed before his eyes. Isadora wasn't just planning to isolate Princess Lina. She was planning to trap her permanently in a marriage that would destroy any chance of the child ever ruling Eldermere with independence and compassion. As the meeting concluded and the various officials departed to carry out their orders, Marcus lingered in the hallway, his mind racing through possibilities and consequences. Time was running short, and his choices were becoming clear. He could continue to serve loyally while watching Princess Lina be systematically destroyed, or he could take action that would brand him a traitor but might save the child who represented hope for the kingdom's future. When Garrett joined him in the empty corridor, Marcus had already made his decision. I need your help, he said simply. I was afraid you were going to say that, Garrett replied with a tired smile. But I suppose I'd never forgive myself if I didn't ask. What exactly are you planning? Something that will probably get us both executed if we're caught. Of course it will. Garrett sighed. When do we start? The next 4 days passed in a whirlwind of careful planning and growing tension. Captain Marcus Thorne maintained his regular duties with practiced precision while secretly laying the groundwork for what he knew would be the most dangerous mission of his life. The palace buzzed with preparations for the journey to the northern fortress, but beneath the surface activity, a different kind of preparation was taking place. Marcus had carefully identified the members of the palace guard he could trust, men who had served under King Edmund and remembered what the kingdom had once been. Garrett proved invaluable in these quiet conversations, his easy manner and long-time friendships allowing him to gauge loyalty without raising suspicion. To their relief, they discovered that many of their fellow guards shared their concerns about Princess Lina's welfare. Sir Owen Blackfield, a grizzled veteran of 30 years' service, was the first to openly support their cause. I've watched that little girl grow from a babe in arms, he told Marcus during a private meeting in the castle's ancient armory. Her mother, Queen Elena, was the kindest soul I ever knew, and Princess Lina has inherited her heart. Damned if I'll stand by and watch Isadora crush it. Sir Thomas Ravenwood, younger but no less passionate, had been even more direct. The Queen Regent's planning something that isn't right. You can see it in her eyes, in the way she looks at the princess. Like she's solving a problem rather than protecting a child. By the third day, Marcus had assembled a core group of 8 loyal guards, each man aware of the risks but committed to protecting Princess Lina from a fate they all recognized as worse than death. The plan they developed was audacious in its simplicity. They would escort the princess to safety during the journey to the northern fortress, making it appear that she had been taken by the eastern rebels rather than rescued by her own guards. The deception was crucial. If Isadora believed that Lord Aldwin's forces had taken Lina, she would focus her anger on the eastern lords rather than investigating her own household for traitors. Meanwhile, Marcus and his men would deliver the princess to a safe location where she could be hidden until she reached an age to reclaim her rightful throne. The safe location had been the most challenging part of the plan to arrange. Marcus had ultimately reached out to an old friend from his days as a young soldier, Brother Benedict, now the abbot of a remote monastery nestled in the mountains of the western province. Benedict had served as a military chaplain during the border conflicts 15 years ago, and had saved Marcus's life more than once. More importantly, he was a man of unquestioned integrity who would protect an innocent child regardless of political consequences. The monastery of St. Aldrich sits 3 days' hard ride west of the capital, Marcus explained to his conspirators during their final planning meeting. It's isolated enough that few people know of its existence, but the monks there are learned men who can continue the princess's education. Brother Benedict will ensure she's safe until she's old enough to understand her choices. And then what? Asked Sir Owen. Eventually she'll have to return and claim her throne. Isadora won't simply fade away. One crisis at a time, Marcus replied grimly. Our first priority is getting her away from Isadora's control. The future will have to take care of itself. Garrett studied the rough map they had drawn of their planned route. The dangerous part will be the first 12 hours. Once we're clear of the immediate search area, we should be relatively safe. But between here and the forest border, we'll be completely exposed. Which is why timing is everything, Marcus agreed. The journey to the northern fortress typically takes 5 days. We'll make our move on the second day, when we're far enough from the capital to make pursuit difficult, but not so far that Isadora can claim we've reached enemy territory. Princess Lina herself remained unaware of the plot being woven around her. Marcus had decided it was safer for everyone if she knew nothing until the moment of action. The child was naturally truthful and might inadvertently reveal something to the wrong person if she knew what was planned. Meanwhile, the palace continued its preparations with increasing urgency. Queen Regent Isadora had received additional reports from the eastern provinces suggesting that Lord Aldwin's support was growing stronger by the day. Several minor noble houses had declared for him, and there were rumors that he was in communication with foreign powers interested in Eldermere's weakness. Marcus observed Isadora during these tense days and noted how the pressure was affecting her. The Queen Regent had always been calculating and cold, but now there was a manic edge to her behavior that spoke of someone losing control of events she had thought she could manage. She snapped at servants for minor infractions, spent hours in private consultation with Lord Blackwood, and issued contradictory orders that kept the entire palace staff on edge. Most telling of all was her behavior toward Princess Lina. Where once Isadora had been content to undermine the child with subtle cruelty, she now seemed unable to bear the girl's presence at all. During the formal dinner 3 nights before their planned departure, Marcus watched in disgust as the Queen Regent publicly humiliated Lina for the crime of asking an innocent question about their destination. The northern fortress? Isadora had repeated in a voice dripping with false sweetness. How typical that you would be curious about such things, princess. Though I suppose it's natural for someone with your limited understanding of statecraft to be concerned about places that actually matter to the kingdom's security. Lord Blackwood had laughed appropriately at his mistress's wit, but Marcus noticed that several of the other nobles present looked uncomfortable with the Queen Regent's open cruelty toward a child. Even Isadora's supporters, it seemed, had limits to what they could stomach. Princess Lina had borne the humiliation with the quiet dignity that broke Marcus's heart every time he witnessed it. The child had learned to school her features into a mask of polite attention, but Marcus could see the hurt in her emerald eyes and the way her small hands trembled slightly as she carefully placed her fork on her plate. That night, after the formal dinner had ended and the palace had settled into its evening routines, Marcus found himself walking past the royal garden once again. As he had expected, Princess Lina was there, seated beneath her favorite oak tree with her journal open on her lap. But tonight she wasn't writing. She was simply staring up at the stars with an expression of profound sadness. Against his better judgment, Marcus approached the garden gate. "Good evening, Your Highness. It's rather late to be outdoors." Lina looked up with surprise that quickly transformed into a small smile. "Good evening, Captain Thorne. I know it's late, but I couldn't sleep. Sometimes the stars help me think. What are you thinking about tonight?" Marcus asked gently, stepping through the gate to join her in the garden. "About my father," Lina replied quietly. "I went to see him this afternoon, but he didn't recognize me again. The physicians say he's getting worse." Marcus felt his heart clench. King Edmund's condition was indeed deteriorating rapidly, and the few moments of clarity he occasionally experienced were becoming rarer each week. "I'm sorry, Princess. I know that must be very difficult for you. Do you think you would be proud of me, Captain?" Lina's question was asked with the heartbreaking earnestness of a child seeking validation from the only adult who had consistently shown her kindness. "I try to be good and study hard and learn my duties, but sometimes I feel like I'm disappointing everyone." "Your Highness," Marcus said firmly, kneeling beside the stone bench so he could meet her eyes directly. "Your father would be incredibly proud of you. You have your mother's compassion and your father's strength, and anyone who can't see that is blind to what truly matters. But Queen Isadora says I'm childish and impractical." She says the kingdom needs someone stronger than me. Queen Isadora is wrong. Marcus replied with quiet intensity. Strength isn't about being cruel or hard. True strength is about protecting those who need protection, about choosing kindness even when it's difficult, about holding on to hope even when things seem dark. You have all of those qualities, princess. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. Lionel's eyes brightened with unshed tears, but they were tears of gratitude rather than sadness. Thank you, Captain Thorn. You always make me feel better. As Marcus walked back to his quarters that night, his resolve hardened into something unbreakable. Princess Lionel was not just a political symbol or a royal bloodline. She was a genuinely good person whose natural compassion and wisdom could heal the wounds that Isadora's rule was inflicting on the kingdom. Protecting her wasn't just about preserving the legitimate succession. It was about preserving the very soul of Eldermere. The following morning brought the final day before their departure. The palace was in chaos as servants packed supplies, guards prepared equipment, and officials made last-minute arrangements for governing the kingdom in the Queen Regent's absence. In the midst of all this activity, Marcus managed a private moment with each of his co-conspirators to confirm their final preparations. Everything was ready. The route to the monastery had been carefully planned and memorized. Supplies for the journey had been secretly cached at strategic points along the way. Most importantly, Brother Benedict had been contacted through discreet channels and had confirmed his willingness to provide sanctuary for the princess. That evening, Marcus stood once again on the castle ramparts, looking out over the kingdom he had sworn to serve. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, he would either be a hero who had saved an innocent child from a terrible fate, or a traitor who had doomed himself and his friends to execution. As he watched the last light fade from the western sky, Marcus thought about the letter he had written to King Edmund, a letter that would only be delivered if their mission failed. In it, he had tried to explain his actions, to make the dying king understand why protecting Princess Lina had required betraying the chain of command that the crown represented. I have served your family with honor for 12 years, the letter read. But I could not stand by and watch your daughter be destroyed by those who should have protected her. If I have committed treason, it is treason in service of a higher loyalty. Loyalty to the innocent, to the just, and to the future of a kingdom that deserves better than fear and cruelty. The letter was hidden in his quarters, along with detailed documentation of Isadora's plans for Princess Lina's future. Whatever happened to Marcus and his men, he wanted the truth to survive them. As the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, Marcus offered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. Not for his own safety, he had accepted the risk of his choice, but for the courage to see it through and for Princess Lina to find the happiness and security that had been stolen from her. Tomorrow would bring either triumph or disaster. Tonight, for the last time, Captain Marcus Thorn stood watch over a kingdom at peace, knowing that by sunset the next day, nothing would ever be the same again. The morning of departure dawned gray and misty, with low clouds rolling through the mountain passes like ghostly harbingers of change. Captain Marcus Thorn stood in the main courtyard of Eldermere Palace, supervising the loading of the royal caravan, while his heart hammered against his ribs with the steady rhythm of anticipated action. Today, everything would be decided. Princess Lina emerged from the palace dressed in a traveling gown of deep blue wool, her golden hair braided simply, and her small travel bag clutched in her hands. Despite the early hour and the somber atmosphere surrounding their departure, she maintained the composure that had been drilled into her since childhood. Marcus noted, however, the way her emerald eyes darted nervously between Queen Regent Isadora and the assembled guards, as if sensing that something momentous was about to occur. Isadora herself was a study in controlled tension. She wore black riding leathers beneath a cloak of royal purple, and her violet eyes scanned the preparations with the intensity of a military commander preparing for battle. Lord Blackwood hovered at her side like a pale shadow, occasionally whispering updates about their escort arrangements and the latest intelligence from the eastern provinces. Captain Thorn, Isadora called out sharply as Marcus approached to confirm the caravan's readiness. I trust you understand the importance of reaching the northern fortress without incident. Princess Lioness' safety is paramount, and any failure in that regard will be poorly received. Of course, Your Majesty, Marcus replied with a formal bow. I've selected our most experienced men for the escort duty. We'll take the northern,